Hi, everybody. Welcome to Queers and Soaps. I'm Tommy, and today I'm joined by Lynn.
Greetings.
We are continuing our coverage of season 1 of Felicity. We're talking about episodes 2 and 3. Didn't work.
Got a hold of it for a while.
So I will roll the credits and we'll get right into it. So right off the bat, I have to say I appreciate the pace of the series because it's a little slow, but it's not boring.
No, they make you think, and I think the slowness helps bring out the emotion and what they want you as the audience to feel.
Right.
The music cues do that too, and I realized what we're watching, a lot of the music may have been replaced. Some of it's still there, but it's just the right type of music that it does speak to the emotion behind it.
Yeah. And I don't really have a familiarity with what the original music was, so it's over my head.
I do for the last season, and when they did change stuff, there was kind of a monumental scene that they changed it, and I was like, oh, but I've now fixed that in my personal library. But yeah, no, I think the show is really good with the emotion and the slowness and how they play it and what they want you to feel. Plus,
So,
I thought this one, there probably was a gap between this one from when they filmed the pilot to this, and they really picked up on things that they needed to reflect back on and kind of establish some things going forward, which was cool too.
Sorry, I'm just like looking up the show because I didn't look up the titles.
Oh yeah, this one's called The Last Stand, episode 2.
Okay, so see, episode 2 is titled The Last Stand. Let me just make sure I have it up. So we open with our Dear Sally moment, where she's speaking into her giant tape recorder that she has to friend.
That tape in there, yeah.
She kind of had a moment where she was just kind of sitting there gleefully, like she had a smirk on her face.
Well, I think she's kind of happy that where she's got this job at the records department, that somebody came up to her, or the woman that works there came up to her and said that a man inquired about her, what was it, application essay or whatever.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it was kind of funny.
Well, because she admitted to Ben in the pilot that she read his essay.
Yes.
She thinks because he knows this that he tried to read her essay.
He's making a lot of assumptions here. So she's a little bit like, he. I think he kind of likes me secretly. Yeah.
Meanwhile, her and Julie, even though we kind of saw that they were good at the end of the pilot, we didn't hear them talk. They just kind of like, there was music playing. They saw each other, they hugged, and they just like walked off into the sunset pretty much.
Oh, exactly.
They kind of reiterate that they're cool, that they're not going to let Ben come between them. Julie's like, yeah, no, I'm not going to see him again.
Yes.
She kind of questions if Felicity is into him, and Felicity's like, no.
Right.
She remains cringy. She does. She has. So I was thinking about it. In the moments of cringe, I feel like I cringe because it's stuff that I would do.
That's funny.
And that's why I'm embarrassed for her, because I'm like,
right. I get it. Yeah.
So she goes to Noel for advice. And he's so cute. I feel like this go around I'm really gonna like his character more than Ben.
Sure. I get it.
She asks him if she should tell Ben that she knows that he read her essay.
Well, or that he wanted to get a copy of it. She's like, should I tell him that I know he asked about wanting to see a copy of my application essay?
Oh, right. She was going to show him.
This person, they wouldn't give out that information. You know what I mean? The person that worked in the records department congratulated Felicity on having a secret admirer, is how it was.
Right.
But they didn't give out the information. So now Felicity's like, maybe I should send him a copy of it. And Noel's like, oh, no, I don't think this is a good idea. And she's like, are you saying that because you like me? And he's like, well, I'm not saying that I don't like you, but I just don't think it's a good idea. So again, she comes to him for advice, completely sets it aside. And what does she do? She goes and gets a copy of her essay, puts it in a letter, addresses it to Ben, takes the tape to Sally, and goes and drops it off in a mail drops box.
This is one of those moments because she pretty much says to him, yeah, I'm gonna mail it, and he's like, why'd you come to me for advice?
Yep, exactly. Does the complete opposite. When you ask me for advice, you do the total 180 on it.
That is totally something I would do. I'd be like, yeah, no, I'm gonna do this.
That's funny. That's
so
funny.
yeah. So then she goes to meet with her counselor,
and
played by Darnell Williams.
She's not, yeah. We got to see another appearance of Darnell Williams, who's played Jessie on All My Children for the fans out there.
And her parents are there.
Surprise.
Apparently they never left New York, and she's like, you lied to me? And they're like, no. She's like, I asked you how your flight was.
She's feeling a little ambushed because she's even called and left messages on her parents' machines that are like 10 minutes long.
Right.
But she feels like, oh, I think I'm in a better place with my parents, even though that dinner we had didn't go well, and she decided to stay in New York.
Right.
So
that famous, I can't wait to see it snow, like see the city when it snows.
Well, then he too, they're starting to accuse her, like, we don't know if you're on drugs or what's going on. And she's like, you think I'm on drugs because I want to stay in New York? And he's like, well, that's why I called the admissions office. We're just trying to reach several different answers from wherever we can get them. And she's like, you called the admissions office?
So then she runs to like the mail.
She does. She takes off, and the parents are like, what's going on? She just doesn't want to. She didn't even sit down. She had this whole conversation like at the doorway when she walked in, and didn't even join them over at the counselor's desk. And she just took off right to the mailroom right away.
And she tries to get the letter back. And the mail guy won't. He's like, that's a federal offense. Because when
that mail guy was so good. That mail guy was so good because he's pretending to listen and not listen. He's like, yeah, what? You know, and this pretty girl's talking to me, but it's like, I can't do that. I can't do that. And she's like, I sent an invitation to a party. I want to make sure he got it. So then he looks up like the box for Ben Covington because she gives his name, and he goes over and he's walking behind these post-op boxes. And where I grew up as a young kid, we had the exact same postal system. So I pick up the mail every day after getting off the school bus and stuff like that. And it's kind of funny seeing through and seeing the people working on the other side. And she's on one side of the glass and he's on the other, and he pulls out the letter and shows it to her, and it's got his name, and we see her eyes blink, and he puts it back, and then he goes back to the counter. She goes back to the counter and she smiles. She's like, is there any way I could get that letter back? Like, I can't do that.
Right. So then Ben comes to get his mail.
Surprise. And she happened to be there.
And she's like trying to figure out, is like, okay, if he grabs the mail, she's like, how do I get this letter out of his hand? And he, by luck, even though it doesn't end up working out for her, gets like somebody bumps into him, and he drops all his mail on the floor. So she's like, this is my shot. So he grabs the letter and he grabs it, and there's kind of like a tug of war. He's like,
I got it. She finally relents and lets go. Oh, so close.
And I almost wondered if the whole episode was going to be like her trying to get this letter back, but it kind of wasn't at all after that.
Right.
Because then it just kind of was about her and her parents' struggle with like, should she stay, should she go,
right,
if they're going to support her.
She like invites them to come visit her dorm so they can get a little bit more comfort with what she's got going on. So she sees Megan. I think we finally hear Megan in a speaking part versus the first time we saw Megan in the pilot. All she did was look at Felicity and go and walk out the door. This time she asked Megan, she's like, could you maybe like pick up some of it? And this is totally your decision. You don't have to do it, but could you maybe like pick up some of your
skulls?
And Megan's like,
no. And when she just said no, I was like, well, there's her SAG card.
Right?
But we actually do see her later when the parents come. She's like, I guess she's like changing in the closet, but Felicity didn't know she was there. And she calls her weird.
She said she's a freak. She's like, she's a freak. But totally in a good way. And then Megan comes out of the closet to all their surprise, and she's like, you think I'm a freak? I don't wear hush puppies. So she's kind of giving a dig to Felicity.
And Noel like storms in and he's like, are the overbearing parents here yet? And then they're like right there. And he was like,
that is so something I would do. I mean, I died for him. I'm like, he was so mortified.
Right. He must have apologized like 1,000 times.
Right.
To the point that the father was like, stop apologizing every time.
Right. And then while he's doing it, the fire alarm goes off. So it's like, it smelled like beer in the hallway. She's got a very different type of roommate than they're used to. Noel insults them. So obviously the parents can tell that Felicity's been talking to Noel about the two of them. And then the fire alarm goes off and he's like, we should probably exit. And they're leaving. And he's trying to apologize again. And the dad's like, just leave it alone.
Also in the middle of all this, there's one of the dorm mates is having an issue with his roommate talking in his sleep saying he wants to kill him.
Right. And talking about wanting to buy knives. So he comes in there and shows Noel a big giant knife in front of Felicity's parents. Yeah. And it's like, oh my God, the timing couldn't be worse. So you're right.
I really want to pay attention to the peripheral dorm mates, because I feel like we're gonna see people that might be bigger now that maybe we're just starting out in their careers. I know Taraji P. Henson is on at one point.
Yep.
But yeah, I want to pay attention to that more.
Definitely.
So I guess they have another meeting with the counselor. And I don't know if I was like taking notes or I looked down or was distracted, but I caught the tail end of this about Tuesday dinners. And then the mom was just like, well, maybe you should come home for Thanksgiving. She's like, you like New York? Maybe you should stay in New York. And I'm like, wait, what did I miss about Tuesday dinners?
Well, so what happened was Felicity they were kind of giving her a chance to talk, and the parents are really sitting there listening. And she was saying, she goes, you know how we used to have our Tuesday dinners, just mom and I? And she goes, and I enjoyed them. But recently I was in the cafeteria and I was having a hamburger. And all of a sudden I realized it was a Tuesday and I was by myself. And all of a sudden it tasted like the best hamburger I ever had. And her mom took that very personal. And she's like, oh, those Tuesday dinners were obviously a chore for you versus I thought we got along and we're quite close. You're saying you couldn't wait to get your independence. And she goes, well, I think, you've made your point, and with how well things are going, there's no need for you to come home this Thanksgiving. And the mom gets up and she walks right out of the room.
Right. And Felicity's supposed to have another dinner with them, but the mother apparently isn't feeling well. But
that's what the dad says when he shows up, exactly. And
he offers to pay her tuition like he was going to do at Stanford, but obviously room and board wasn't included because she was going to be living at home.
Yeah,
I guess. So he says, I'll pay the tuition and you pay for the room and board. He's like, does that sound fair? So that makes sense.
She's like, well, you don't have to do that. And he's like, I didn't work this hard to have my only child go to college without me having to pay for it. So he basically is saying he wants to enact the plan that he put in place, and he's kind of relenting and giving in to her. And I think because the mom is so hurt now the dad's having to come down from playing bad cop and having to play good cop a little bit because the mom just doesn't want to even see Felicity at this stage.
We learned that Julie was adopted.
Yes.
And that she came to school in New York because she found out that her biological mother is in New York.
Yep.
And she says that if her adoptive parents were to find that out, that would devastate them.
Exactly.
So that was like a bonding moment between her, Julie and Felicity.
Yes.
And she makes her promise not to say anything, and Felicity says, I promise, and she's like, I know. And I'm just like, do you though? Because Felicity has a big mouth.
Well, it always seems to come out at the worst time. Her timing's not good. She's very awkward and clumsy this way.
I'm like, Felicity has a tendency to word vomit.
But the two girls do relate, and they're like, wow, I've never felt so grown up. So they're realizing they're making a lot of decisions that now are affecting their parents versus it used to be the other way around. The parents would make the decisions that affect the children. Now the tables have turned a little bit. So they're having that, I'm growing up moment.
Right. I guess before the dinner, yeah, because it was before Felicity walked up. Noel and the father have another scene together, and he's
Yes.
like had things go with the whole knife situation.
He's like, it's under control. He's like, and I'll watch out for your daughter. So that was kind of his way to try and ease his mind a little bit, because you're right. They had this dinner before they were going to leave, and then it kind of transitions to the next day, and the parents are leaving the hotel, and you just see the mom like putting her earrings on and checking her dress, and they kind of walk out, and she kind of turns and looks at the hotel, and then to everybody's surprise, the mom shows up at Felicity's dorm room, knocks on the door, but she's not there. She even tries the door and it doesn't open, and she goes down to Julie's dorm room, and she's like, hey, do you know Felicity, and do you know where she might be? And I'm trying to remember, she caught Felicity like, was it in the hallway, or
I think Felicity was with the counselor at the time.
Or was she like on a bench outside of some room or whatever, and she sat down next to her, and they just had a discussion about how I do see a lot of myself in you. She's like, at your age, I was very impressionable, and I was kind of enamored. And it doesn't come out yet what she means by that, but she kind of put everything in the path of Felicity's dad, and it kind of went that way, and the decisions were kind of made. So she too was kind of making decisions based on a boy.
Yeah, she says that. When you said that you came here because of a crush on a guy, she's like, it triggered me.
Yep.
Yeah, and this is when I found out the mom had her at 20, and that would make her 38 if Felicity was 18.
Right.
I am 38, so I am Felicity's mother.
Here we are.
I'm actually closer to 39, so I'm definitely her mother.
That's funny. But then, ironically, the timing of the show is just so funny. Who happens to come down the hall at that moment but Ben? And he's like, hey, I got your letter. Thanks for sending that. So now she's like, oh, yeah. And Ben, the cool thing I like about Ben is he kind of plays it off. He doesn't embarrass her. He just acknowledges it, and he moves on. And then he's like, oh, I better get to class. And he turns around, and they do the pan up of Ben's body from his shoe all the way up to like his head, and watch him round the corner. And both Felicity's mom and Felicity kind of lean forward and look at him. And the mom even goes, he's cute. So she got to meet the Ben, and she understands a little bit more about why Felicity made the decisions that she made. And it kind of made the two of them kind of come to an understanding, if you will.
Yeah. And she tells her, I want you to come home for Thanksgiving.
Yes.
I think that's pretty much how it ended, right?
It pretty much did end that way. So it just kind of like had some resolve before the parents left town, thank goodness, for everybody's sake. So Felicity felt a little bit better too.
All right. Well, episode 4 is called Boggled. Nope,
it's called Hot Objects.
Episode 3 is called Hot Objects.
Yes, exactly.
So basically the premise of this is they're having a dorm party. Her first college party.
The first college party. Woohoo, it's a big deal.
In the early part of the episode, Ben mentions how he never really saw her at any of the high school parties.
Yeah.
Felicity got the chemistry class that she wanted. It's a professor that wrote, I guess, all the high school chemistry books that she had. So
and Ben's like, you're happy about that? And then meanwhile, he got like stuck with a drama class that he doesn't want to take. And he wanted some different class, and he's kind of stuck in drama until he can get into this other class.
Right. And he has to like stand up in front of the class and do like basically a monologue about an object and what it means to him. And he's like not really thrilled about this. So he tries to explain to the professor that he's switching, and the professor's like, well, as long as you're in my class, you're going to participate.
The professor is so good. He was on The Sopranos, and he was a total badass on The Sopranos. So to see him in a much more encouraging and reflective light was really kind of interesting.
Just to start like rewind a little bit, the actor that was playing the male guy, he was in a lot of the WB dramas back then. He would pop up in everything. Gilmore Girls. He was on the show Popular.
I think he was on Dawson's Creek maybe too for a little bit. I don't know.
He pops up on a lot of stuff.
Yep.
I don't know his name, but he's
I
funny.
don't either. Yep,
He's a character actor, I guess.
definitely.
So there was a character, one of the dorm mates, I guess, who had connections. They weren't really saying mob connections, but that's the vibe I got.
No, I mean, she's this. Noel's trying to help plan this dorm party. One guy wants a band. He's like, we're going to have to be fine with the DJ. And then he's like, we're going to need this. We're going to need that. And all of a sudden, just this gal leaning, playing, looking at her beeper or whatever she's doing. She's like, I can get that for you. And she's obviously got a Russian accent. And she's like, my family, I know people. I'll take care of all of it. And he's
Yeah.
like, oh, okay.
And whoever she gets to help, he's like, can I have one request? Because Felicity asked for chocolate. And he's like, you want girls? Like, I was like, he's connected to the mob.
Exactly.
And he's like, no. So I wondered if this was a dry party, but then later on we saw kegs, like empty kegs.
And they had to have had alcohol there. But let's face it, some of those people had to have been underage because there's no way they were probably all legal. Right. I don't know what the drinking age is in New York. You tell me.
It's 21.
I was going to say, and it probably was at that time too. So, yeah.
I mean, not that college students have ever.
Oh, I mean, that's a big part of it. Kind of funny, but yes, it was kind of funny. So let's even back up, like you said, about Felicity meeting her college professor in the chem class.
So she couldn't get her textbook, and she looked everywhere. She used all her MetroCard money going uptown, downtown, Barnes and Nobles.
Yep.
She had to order it.
And she tells him this.
Mm-hmm.
And he's not impressed. He kind of is cold to her right away. And she's off put by that because maybe she's used to being liked by most of her teachers. And she really respected this professor because he wrote a lot of the stuff that was in their chem and science books when she was in high school. So that's why she was excited to have this class. And to start off on the wrong foot, it really throws her off her game.
Yeah. So she asked the professor, is it going to be required that I have the textbook to be able to follow along? And he's like, yeah. And he says, show of hands, who was not able to get the textbook? And nobody raises their hand. So she's the only one that wasn't able to. And I'm like, all right. But she has it on pre-order. And she later on feels the need to tell him that she made copies of all the pages that she was going to read.
It cost me $20. She even told him how much. Like, girl, just like he doesn't care. He doesn't care. Just shut up, sit down, do the work, and be good.
Right.
Again, she's in that mode where, and she was probably an honor student all through high school, so I get it. They feel the pressure like crazy. So she feels the need to justify where she's at.
Mm-hmm. She tells Julie that she wants to invite Ben to the dorm party. And she asked Julie if she's okay with that. And she's like, yeah, no. She's like, there's nothing going on between me and Ben, so it's fine.
Exactly. And she goes, oh, you weren't at the thing last night. And she goes, there was the thing. And she's like, yeah, but there's a bunch of us at Lucky Strike. And that's it. And Julie doesn't say that Ben was there.
Right.
Ben was there.
Ben apparently keeps trying to ask Julie out, and she keeps telling him no. But because she knows that Felicity wants him to come to the party, she says there's a dorm party going on, so she invites him to that.
Yep.
After a few failed attempts to invite Ben, she finally does invite him, and he's like, oh yeah, Julie already told me. Or Julie invited me. And she's like, oh. And so now her insecurities start churning.
Meanwhile, she's bought a special dress for the party, and her roommate, Megan, sees the dress, and she's like, oh, do you got that for the party? And she's like, oh, is Julie going and her little Tiger Beat boyfriend? And she's like, what? And she's like, Julie and Ben aren't going out. And she's like, are you blind? She's like, they see each other all the time. They were at Lucky Strikes together the other night. She laughs at all his jokes, and she says all these things that makes Felicity kind of just stop a minute, and the insecurities come in, and she starts overthinking everything.
Meanwhile, she's doing her Dear Sally tapes, and she says something embarrassing about dreaming or wondering.
Well, thinking her and Ben would dance and dance and dance and dance the whole night.
And that
come back to her dorm room, and they just kind of collapse and talk the whole night. But yet she can still imagine being sexual for the first
First
time with
time,
someone
right,
else.
right.
And
And
she
she
says all this
says,
stuff.
"Delete this." She's like, "Delete this the minute you listen to it," or
Right.
whatever.
And then she's like, talk back soon. And she goes over to the dresser to put a label on the tape. And as she's doing all this stuff, there's a knock at the door, and it's Noel. And he's like, oh, you look really pretty and really nice. Meanwhile, the party's about to get started, and the Russian gal shows up, and she's like, we're taking music requests. And Felicity's like, oh, I've got some tapes on the dresser. And the gal goes over there and scoops up all the tapes.
Right. And she starts dancing, and this is the only one time that I was like, huh, I wonder if this was the real music. Because even though when they film things, they're not actually hearing the music.
Right.
But I'm just like, this is probably not the real music that was played.
I think the very first song where it was heavy, boom, 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 like you're at the nightclub.
Yeah.
But then after that, they kept changing the tapes and showing that happen. And I bet they switched out all that music that came after
Probably.
that.
So Felicity sees Ben comes to the party, and she's welcomed by Julie because he sees her first.
And of course, this is all happening in slow motion. We see this and her watching this, and he's like leaning in and she's smiling, and you know damn well Felicity's queuing up what Megan said to her in her head.
Right. And she confronts Julie. She's like, I don't know if I can believe anything you say. And I'm just like, oh boy.
Oh God, it got off. It's like, I'm feeling like you're lying to me, and you guys have been hanging out. And then Julie's like, you know what? Ben's asked me out several times, but I haven't said yes because of you. And I just feel really, I don't remember if she said hurt by that or frustrated too. And they both girls like part ways. Meanwhile, over against the wallflowering this whole time was now a new full-time character.
Oh, right.
Elena is sitting there and she's asking Felicity, are you okay? And Felicity's like, yeah. And she's like, well, you don't seem okay. And the Russian brother or friend of the gal that helped put the party together is changing out tapes. And at that moment, he changes the tape, and it's Felicity talking. And it's her getting ready to say to Sally how she feels she could be sexual for the first time. And Felicity hears it right away, and she's like, can you turn that off? Stop that, please? She's like on the other side of the room from where they're playing the tapes, and everybody was dancing, and she's trying to get through the crowd, and she's yelling, but we don't hear her yelling, and it's happening in slow motion. You know, she's just mortified, and like Julie and Ben are kind of looking into her because they know it's her voice, and all of a sudden, you know, she's like, to be sexual for the first time, and that gets said, and she gets up there and hits stop and pulls out the tape, and
everybody's just staring at her,
and she's like, and she turns around and just mortified and walks out of the room and goes back to her room
to find two people making out in her bed.
Right, exactly. And she kicks him out, and then who comes to see her? Julie comes to see her, and she's laying on the bed, and she's like, hey, I'm really sorry. And she's like, can you just leave me alone? And Julie kind of just backs out of the room.
So their whole confrontation sounded like they were resenting each other. And earlier in the episode, when they were talking about inviting Ben to the party, she flat out said, I just don't want there to be like a feeling of resentment between us. And there clearly is resentment.
Totally. I mean, they're just not being 100% truthful. Felicity's not being 100% truthful, that she's still mad crushing on Ben. You know what I mean? Yeah. Julie's not being truthful that she too is crushing on Ben. And Ben's just like, hey, you know what I mean? I love this show because right away at the beginning of this, it happened on episode 2 and it happened on this episode, where they always greet each other and it's like, hey. And WB did commercials about that, where one of them was just like 15 seconds of all them saying, hey.
Yeah. That was a thing on Dawson's Creek. Oh, no, it was Sia Dawson. That's what it was. That's how they always say goodbye to each other. So the side story that was going on with Ben and that drama teacher, he doesn't take the project seriously. He brings a sandwich as an object the first time around.
Right.
And I guess the teacher doesn't buy that.
Teacher's like, that's not good enough. You're going to get an incomplete if that's all you're going to present.
So he ends up using keys as an object. And he seems to think that him being around was causing friction between his parents, and he'd seen pictures of them together before he was born, and they just look so happy.
Right.
And he seems to think that him being in New York away from them might make them happy again.
He's saying, yeah, so he's antiquating the keys, symbolizing this is where he's supposed to be, and
Mm-hmm.
things will be better for his parents if he's just not there.
Right. And I guess that's acceptable because the teacher kind of nods and
he saw the emotion coming out with Ben because Ben was getting a little dry throat as he was talking about this and stuff too. And the teacher finally just nods, and obviously this is going to suffice. But he went there, and that's what the assignment was. But it took something for him to get there. Ironically, while he went there, he must have set his keys down and left them there.
right.
So now we're going to switch back to the party. Felicity sneaks out and goes get some ice cream.
I was just going to say that. Was that because I was like, I guess it's the same night because Ben is still there.
Totally.
So after the party, she went to go get ice cream?
The party was still going on. She went out to get ice cream. When she's getting ice cream, she runs into her professor, and she's like, what did I do? And he's like, we're going to be just fine. Which is basically he's saying, stop overthinking it and don't worry about it, because he's not thinking about it outside of the room. And at first he doesn't even know what she's talking about.
He tells her, don't worry about me, worry about yourself.
Exactly. So then she goes back, chugs down her ice cream, has a sugar crash, and has a knock at her door. And it's Ben. And he's like, hey, sorry about what happened. It's cool. He's like, I left my keys at school because I used them for this assignment, and everybody else is gone. He's like, would it be okay if I crashed on the floor? And she's like, you want to stay here? So now she's like kind of replaying in her head. She's like, God, I said to Sally, what if Ben ended up back in my dorm room? And it's like, now it's happening. She's like, well, you can sleep in Megan's bed. She's never here. And he's like, okay, I'm going to crash. And he goes and passes out in Megan's bed.
I thought he was going to crash in her bed because I was like, oh, Megan's probably going to come home at some point. She's going to be pissed when she sees that her bed is slept in.
Right. But she was right. She never came home. So she wakes up the next day and just sees him there. And she kind of goes over and studies him.
That is, I feel like, a scene that they've used in promos for the show. Like her just like watching him sleep, which is a little creepy.
Kind of crouches down and just watches him sleeping there, and she's kind of just silently studying him because she's getting a chance to really stare at him without him knowing it or catching her doing it.
Right. I think that was pretty much it, right?
And did her and Julie talk too? Maybe the next day. I can't remember if they kind of made up or not. If that happened, I'm not certain, but
I don't think they did.
Maybe it didn't happen. You're right. Maybe it just ended with her just kind of watching him.
Yeah.
That was the end of it. So she kind of has some resolve in the fact that, well, yeah, that slipped out. Nobody heard that tape. So I've kind of been labeled a virgin, you know what I mean? But then she at least had some resolve with her teacher, and she feels better about when she's going to return to class and her professor doesn't hate her.
I find it interesting how the characters I remember aren't all here yet. They're just kind of slowly being rolled out one by one.
Right.
We got Elena today. You said the actor that plays Sean, his voice was in the pilot.
Yes.
He was mentioned in one of these episodes, but we didn't see him.
He was, yes. Because when Ben was given his monologue, he's like, oh, I rent this place from this great guy with a couple other guys. So there's like 4 of us there. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, he was referring to Sean. But, yeah, we still haven't seen Sean yet.
Right. So, is Elena also pre-med? We found out that Felicity is still going to be pre-med.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I thought I remembered that.
Mm-hmm.
And that was pretty much it.
That was pretty much it. I'm kind of like looking through the list of cast members here, and
Noel missed the whole tape thing because early on, I guess somebody was allergic to the chocolate that Felicity requested.
Yeah, they had an allergic reaction. We ended up having to take him to the urgent care or something like that. The emergency it was kind of funny.
There was nobody that I recognize as like a parochial dorm mate that could be like considered more famous now.
Right.
I thought at first maybe the blonde was Allie Larder, but like just that quick like glance, I'm like, that's not her.
Yeah, right.
But
No, it
Yeah,
was
I'm
good.
really liking
There
it.
was just kind of some simple things, and they're kind of still just slowly building the relationship. They kind of definitely picked up where they left off, and it's like they're still getting used to their surroundings and used to their independence and how to get what they want.
So now that Felicity is gonna have to pay for her board, her room, I'm guessing that's why she gets a job at the coffee shop.
I believe you're correct if I remember now correctly, because I don't think she has any other job other than working in that student records thing at school. The coffee shop
Mm.
is definitely going to give her more money.
So I wonder if we'll be getting that, and if not next episode, maybe within the next couple of episodes.
Within the next couple, I bet you're right. Yep. Which the coffee shop is great. That Dean and DeLuca, that plays a big part in the series too.
I think that was a real coffee shop, like in the city, that they just used.
I feel like it was, yes.
I mean, I don't. At that point, I wasn't going to like off-brand, like start like I would go to
Sure.
Starbucks and Dunkin'. I wasn't going to like fancy coffee shops.
Got it. No, I get it. I mean, if it was for surely real, it was great free publicity for them.
Yeah, Sex and the City did that a lot
Without a doubt.
So,
Yep.
but
Cool.
all right, I guess we could wrap this up.
Yep.
Thanks for joining us for another edition of Felicity. We are going to continue this with season 1. Maybe another couple episodes next time.
Sure.
And as always, you can find us on all the socials at Queers and Soaps. And until next time, have a great day. Bye.
Bye, guys.